what I'm working on today is going to be to till these terraces. Now, we talked about in the past about permanent raised beds. Well, not everything here is permanent raised beds. Some of these areas are still under development, and that means that maybe we don't have a level area to work with. So what we're doing is using shallow tillage or a combination of different tillage in order to get those areas leveled out, get that soil fed, get it in cover crops. Now it's September right now, so what we're doing is we're getting these beds leveled out. We're just going to get cover crops in them, and we're going to leave things like these rows of wildflowers, let them die out, let those seeds circulate in the soil before we cut those down. Over here we expanded the width of a couple terraces. Instead of making them narrow rows, making them much wider. Again, I'm going to till those out. Up here we have I broke down this area. We're going to get a big level terrace in here. Going to get that tilled out. We're going to maintain these mounds, these permanent raised beds, but I'm going to do some shallow tillage from the walkway all the way out to the bund. And then these beds have manure on them right now. I'm going to get that manure spread out. Shallow tillage is going to be 2 inches to 3 inches. And all I'm really doing is just tearing up everything that was there before and just trying to level things out and get it ready for cover crop seed. There'll be some greens up here. Now you'll see these areas where I wasn't able to brush flail those because we're kind of on little hills. It's kind of a berm here. But this is this most steep part of the hill. We're kind of stepping it down before we get to much wider terraces. And then that end out there, probably not going to do much with because it's going to need to be reshaped a little bit of earthworks. So I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. What we're talking about here is our end of summer, fall preparation, where we're feeding the soil with manures. We're feeding the soil with chopped biomass. We're going to work a little bit on structure here because some of these beds are too narrow to use the flail mower on and too long to do by hand all the time. So we're going to kind of expand the bed a little bit, clean it up, and then I again will use a shallow tillage to get our beds prepared for cover crops. Now in some areas I did blast the soil out. We decided to go ahead and make like a rectangular bed right here because it starts to get too narrow. One of the challenges with contoured beds is sometimes the contours intersect with each other. So you can see a contour down there right behind the wildflowers. We got a little bump of bushes here or trees. We can give this area a little shade. Come down a little narrow path, and then you see how that's not even a bed width. So what I'm going to end up doing is going to make a little rectangle over there, and then it'll step down to a kind of a growing space, a bed, and then that bed will widen up on this end where it's flat again. And we're going to have that pivot point being these honey locust trees, which we're kind of selecting the primary trunk and then cutting out all the plant around it so that we give ourselves some trees that we can pollard and give a little bit of shade out in the garden area in case I want to get a break because it gets damn hot out here. So you can see the way these beds work. Sometimes they'll come out to a point. Well, again, squaring off that end gives us kind of little nooks where we can have little beds. So this will begin again be a rectangular bed, and then below the rectangular bed there'll be a contour bed, kind of a wide contoured bed. And you can see how nice that flail mower does, just chopping up this soil. Now we don't want to till it deep in here because we are not incorporating our biomass into deep layers of soil. That doesn't actually give you any value. It can cause things to ferment, can cause problems. We're essentially just top 2 or 3 inches, scraping that off and just turning it over in the top 2 or 3 inches of soil to kind of incorporate the crop residue, but not to bury it. We want it to compost on the surface. Now over here I busted up the soil a little bit more. This will be a much wider level terrace. But again, the hill and the slope is different here than it is on the other side. So we're doing adjustments for our slope as we're shaping beds. Now you'll see a couple big brush areas that we didn't touch. I'll show you this one over here. This brush area actually contains bulbed flowers. Now it's a lot of overgrowth, but again, We've got bulbed flowers in here, and you can see the flowers. Okay, when those tops die, we'll flail mow it, and then we'll come back and plant some more bulbs in here, or put some mulch down to keep the grass from coming back. We got the same thing down on the bottom here, a couple terraces that I busted them apart to make much wider terraces. And those I'm just essentially gonna till out to make one giant wide terrace on this side. And this side's gonna have two wide terraces, one wide here and one wide at the one at the top. And then at the lower boundary of that road, we're gonna have another wildflower strip. So if you think about it, this road is gonna have access back and forth. It'll have raw manures on it when we're turning compost. It might have vehicles come through it. So the edges are non-edible plants, tend to be flowers, things that are just gonna soak up the nutrients. With our vegetative strips between our terraces, we're also providing a little bit of habitat, and we're catching a lot of the nutrients that might run off the beds. There are areas where we're allowing the beds to grow out with our plants in them, but that's mainly because we want those bulbs to multiply. We can come in with a scythe once the top is dead, or come in with the flail mower and cut everything down. But again, we don't want to disturb those bulbs, so those areas will never receive any tillage, but they will get layers of wood chips, for example. They might get layers of compost put in, and then after the bulbs are fully mature, we'll dig them all out. We might do that with a rotary tiller, with a vertical rotary plow. But again, these beds are likely going to have a little more hand work because we want to save those bulbs. We want those bulbs to split out. So we got this nice little path coming through here. We don't do anything to touch this path. You know, we just drive stuff on it. Now maybe one day in the future we might level the path out a little bit by excavating the top and building a mound up better for these lower beds. But again, we're not worried about that right now. And then of course that area over there is another set of bulbs that I'm not going to touch today. So we'll get this into terraces, big giant terrace level areas, so that we can plant them out with cover crops, lettuces, daikon radish, things like that. We're feeding the soil while minimizing soil disturbance. Any deep tillage is done more of excavation work than it is a regular activity. And ultimately we're allowing a lot more biomass to grow than you would normally see in a garden, because like, so for example, these wildflowers have got grass is growing in between them. That's fine with us, we don't care. It's all about getting as much root mass in the soil and not disturbing it, and as much growth above the soil and turning it into compost and mulches. I think I do have a pile of manure over there I can shovel up and spread on these beds. You know, if you got manure, shallow tillage is great because it incorporates it in the surface, spreads it out evenly through the beds, and then when you get a couple rains, you get a little soakage. Just check this little bee out before we go. That's what we're looking for. Natural interactions, biomass creation, and then feeding that soil with minimal disturbance. So we got some beds around here that are getting no disturbance, no tillage, nothing. We got other beds that are still being shaped, that will receive heavy tillage and shaping. And we've got other beds that'll get very light tillage, and it's just basically tearing up that surface so we have good seed soil contact without burying the biomass. And then of course there's beds that are a little combination of each that are more hand worked. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. If you got questions about what we're covering here, or you want to participate in a class, visit the website below, www.prosperityhomestead.org. Ultimately, what we're doing is creating the most productive use of space, which in this particular compound, there's a big giant fence all the way around this. In this particular compound, the best use of this space is a vegetable garden and a variety of demonstration beds for the center here that I'm working for. And we're doing it in a way that it's going to be less and less work over time. A lot of these beds, when they're the right length or width, we'll be able to just run a tiller over them lightly between plantings and then come out here and plant. And eventually it'll just be broad fork it, because a lot of this seed, this surface seed, will have worked its way out by growing. Now, could we use animals to do some of this? Certainly could. Could do a lot of different things, and if you were here we could walk through some of those options. Right now I'm just going to get to work. I got stuff to do, and it's got, you know, I only have so much sun time. Thanks for watching.